All right, let's get this started. Hello, everyone. My name is Bella Garcia, and I'm CEH's Procurement Program Manager. I wanted to first thank you all for joining us today for our Ditching Disposables 2.0, a toolkit for healthier foodware in K-12 schools webinar. This updated toolkit that CEH has been working on over the past year has some amazing new content, and after today, we're hoping that you come away with a better understanding of this resource and are inspired to take action in your community. On the agenda today, we will first start with CEH's Procurement Program Coordinator, Ben Schleifer, who has over 6 years of experience working as a science educator in public schools and 4 years of experience working on environmental transformation of schools' cafeterias. He'll be presenting a deep dive into what's been updated, best practices for using this toolkit, and tips for implementing these strategies at your K-12 school. Additionally, we're pleased to welcome Fremont Unified School District's Recycling Coordinator, Stephanie Willits, who has been with this district for 9 years managing their solid waste and sustainability programs and has an extensive background in managing the commercial organics, multifamily, and FUSD programs in Alameda County. Stephanie will be speaking on her experience moving 10 elementary schools to reusable, non-toxic food serviceware. Lastly, we'll be hearing from CEH's procurement intern and current Dublin High School junior, Tarun Rajesh. Tarun has been a great ally in this work and played a pivotal role in authoring, advocating for, and implementing the Roosevelt Resolution, a policy initiative aimed at transforming schools towards zero waste initiatives that was adopted by 2 school districts. On today's webinar, he will be providing a high school student's perspective on advocating for zero waste cafeteria solutions. Questions will be answered at the end of all of our presentations during our 15-minute Q&A session, so please use the Q&A option to submit these questions. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded and a YouTube link will be sent out after the webinar and will also be available on CEH's website. Just wanted to thank you all again, and with that, I can turn it over to Ben to begin the presentations.
Thank you so much, Bella. Yes, my name is Ben Schleifer, he, him pronouns. I am based out of Oakland, California, unceded Ohlone land. And so CEH is all about getting toxic chemicals out of the lived environment. And we're going to be talking about some of the chemicals that we might be finding in school lunches today. But this is also a kind of an introduction to the 2.0 version of our Ditching Disposable toolkit, which helps you get rid of some of those chemicals that might be present in school. So next slide. I took this picture on Monday. This is a kind of school dumpster, and you can see that there are a lot of trays stacked in here. And it is not just a problem of plastic. This is a single-use problem. And single-use I call a wasteful and ridiculous problem. It's resource extensive, so you have to be constantly extracting resources to make these products. The intent is actually not environmental. It's use these trays for maybe 20 minutes and then discard them. They have to be shipped to the school and then they have to be picked up. The cleanup is a whole other hassle that is embedded into the system. How do we dispose these things? Can they go to the compost? Can they be recycled? Are they destined for the landfill? And all these elements have climate impacts as well associated with them. This does not come out of nowhere. We have a history of trying to move the country from reusables to single use. You all may have seen that Times or the Life article back in the 50s where they're just throwing up all the single use plastics. This is also on top of an underfunded school meal system that the country relies on to feed its youth, but then doesn't pay enough to kind of get the students what they need. And so the system is designed, it's been designed for single use for the past 40 years. And this is the real problem, is that we are teaching young people of this behavior every single school day at the institutional level. It is okay to throw away a plastic something and never think about it again. And this is the problem embedded in single use, which I just wanted to call out. And so next slide, please. A lot of the solutions related to single use is zero waste, which are great, recycling and composting at school. But as someone who's done recycling and composting at school for 7 years, it is very challenging. It's icky. It's at the end of life, so people don't want to think about it. Students have other priorities, teachers have other priorities, nutrition staff have other priorities than thinking about the waste. I can't tell you how many times where I go into a school and folks are like, it's not getting recycled. And so this rumor is invasive in part of the system. I think the custodians are recycling these things and getting them to the dumpsters that they want. But we hear that 10% of plastic is actually getting recycled. And that can kind of embed as like, well, recycling is happening right at school. So there is this misconception that the stuff isn't actually getting recycled, which leads to folks not trying to sort their waste appropriately. That is also some places don't have mixed stream recycling or compost, industrial compost. So those folks can't really move to this type of solution. And you got to remember that these are 20-minute lunches. The recess is often after that. And so folks are just like in a rush, and sorting is kind of the last thing that they're wanted. And again, it's underfunded, which lends itself to single-use items coming in these lunches. Next slide. And so y'all probably know some of the environmental impacts of single use, but the single use items are toxic. We had these expanded polystyrene trays, also known as styrofoam, that were kind of in schools for 20 years. They're light, they're disposable, you don't have to think about them. We learned that they're toxic, we learned that they're very bad for the environment, and then we segued to these molded fiber products. The problem with the molded fiber products is that they've been shown to have PFAS, per- polyfluorinated alkaline substances in them. That is also a toxic chemical that can migrate into the food that it's served on. So we're replacing bad with bad, a regrettable substitution. All along, we have these single-use utensils, which are wrapped in a different type of plastic that are embedded in the system. And it can seem daunting, it can seem like a lot. Next slide. But it's important to put this in a broader context. We moved from reuse in school meals to single use. We tried to replace some of that single use with a product that wasn't a healthy or good for the environment. And so now we are pushing really back to reusables. This is a circle. We're going back to what we started with. And so it's important to keep that mindset. We've done this as schools before, and we can do it again. Next slide. And so I also want to point out that plastic is indeed a problem, and we take the cautionary principle at CH, and we say plastics are not safe for young people or really anyone to eat off of. Let's see if this works. Next. You'll see that there are studies that are coming out. I've used The Guardian, but they're coming out about microplastic being detected in different and sensitive parts of the human body. Next. And they keep coming out. Next. And they keep coming out. Next. And we are just at the cusp of understanding what the health impacts of these microplastics in our bodies are. And so we're getting really good at detecting it. We're not quite there at understanding the longitudinal effects of all these micro and nanoplastics in our body. Next slide. So again, it could be a problem for a variety of folks. Next slide. So CH has in the past put out a green screen certification. We have done it for single-use products, but since this new Ditching Disposable came out, we have also done it for reusable products. And these products are tested for a variety and a host of different chemicals to make sure that they're not have any chemicals of concern. These are some of the products that are currently green screen certified. CH would love nothing more to get more certifications out there. You'll notice that a lot of these, or all of these, are stainless steel at the moment. These are the ones that are easiest to test, but we're hoping that we can get a variety of material products that are safe to eat off of green screen certified. So if you're buying reusables, it's important to ask to get them green screen certified. Next slide. One of our great partners, Plastic Free Restaurants, has done just this. They have a lovely subsidy that they will buy the reusables for the school if they're replacing single-use plastic products. If it's going to be bought for a school, it needs to be green screen certified. And so that's why you saw so many school kind of based products there. But yeah, we just want to uplift the subsidy. They very much want to get more reusables into K through 12 schools. Next slide, please. Okay, so the real thing is we are relaunching the Ditching Disposable Toolkit. We've discovered that even once you get these reusables using the plastic-free restaurant subsidy, it is hard to get them in the hands of students and get the schools using it and using it sustainably. And I say sustainably meaning forever, like they can just do it. And that's because system change is very hard. And we realized that, and we wanted to create a resource that can help you change the school lunch system to non-toxic, to reusables, to circular. And so we've included updates to the planning guide from some of the years of experience I've had transitioning schools. We've put in some of the new and latest resources because these studies keep coming out with the harms of plastic and other toxic chemicals in foodware. We've also got some case studies, which I think can be very compelling when you're trying to convince your school community to make the switch to reusables. We also have some more pictures, which are probably the most compelling part of the case studies, is that students are using these pictures. And so we're hoping that we can enlist more folks to become champions with this expertise. There are thousands of schools out there that are ready for reuse, and we can't be at all of them. We want to enlist other champions to take on that mantle. And we're hoping that this revamp of Ditching Disposable Toolkit can do that. Next slide. So again, this guide can help you. First off, the old guide we included all the information from the old guide. We just revamped it as well to make sure that you have the best and newest knowledge available. So if you love the old guide, great. It's all in there, and now we've added even more. And so this guide can help you identify your audience and allies, because it is going to take a community to help make this transition. This is not a one-person transition. It helps you set achievable goals. It really encourages to practice flexibility. When you're working with school communities, flexibility is absolutely key. And it also, and this is something I really need to work on, helps you celebrate the wins. The wins are super important. And remember, when you're celebrating a win, it's not just the audience for that school or that district, but the surrounding schools and the surrounding districts. The ripple effect is super huge when doing a transition to safer reusables. So I'm going to include some best practices peppered throughout this. One of the things that I learned is that starting at the beginning of the school year, this time is the nutrition director's busiest time. And we are thinking about this project sustainably. So it's absolutely okay, and it's probably a better move to think about launching in October or November or in the spring semester. That's when the nutrition directors have a little bit more bandwidth, and we can make sure that the project is lasting long. Everyone loves the back to school hype, and I appreciate that, but there's a lot going on during back to school. And if we're thinking about this long term and we want this project to continue, it's middle of the school year is fine for a launch, or even just beginning the conversations. I've also found that the health impacts land in a different way than when talking about the environmental impacts. The environmental impacts are very urgent, but they feel less urgent than when you're talking about the fertility of young people being affected by the chemicals of these foodware. That lands in a very different way, and that is important to kind of uplift, and that's why the Center for Environmental Health is in this space. I've also found that students can be a very impactful messenger, in the sense that it is just harder to argue with young people when they're talking about their future. They don't want any more plastic on Earth, and they're talking about, this is my personal health that your lunch is affecting, and I need you to make sure that it is the safest possible. Excellent. Next slide. So what is new? We have some more case studies. Try next, see if the animation works. Yes, so we have some more case studies. We have a variety of different washing models to help folks, because a lot of schools just can't put in a dish machine, to kind of think about it in a new way. So there is a few case studies, and where we'll hear more from Stephanie about Fremont, which is one of the new case studies. Next. The planning guide has gotten more extensive, with a deeper dive into how to talk with nutrition staff and nutrition directors. It's also talking about dish machine and dish machine capacity, as well as some best practices. Next slide. I've had a chance to write a couple of very interesting lessons about switching to reusables, about the chemistry, with the students hopefully writing persuasive essays. And these lessons I've tried with elementary, middle, and high school. It is kind of geared towards fourth graders to kind of write a persuasive essay about picking out which tray is the best. I piloted multiple times and the students always land on stainless steel, which was really cool. And next, again, the appendix has a lot of scientific resources. If you want to deep dive or someone tells you the prove it line, we want you to feel equipped that you have those resources to be like, I can prove it. And here's the pile of papers that shows that PFAS are indeed a problem and getting into the food, and we should be doing something about it. Next slide. So those case studies are I was talking about. Again, there is no one size fits all for school. You're going to have to learn about the school, the system, the nutrition staff, the custodial staff to kind of figure out what would be the best fit. But we have 3 general models that have been working for us. So there's washing on site, and you can see there's a picture of a door type dish machine in the corner there, and that they just wash one set of dishes every day after lunch. This can work if you have the space, if you have the dish machine, if you have the staff to do it. The second one is the washing offsite. So let's say we are going to put in a large dish machine at the high school, and then we have to circulate the dishes from the elementary to the high school for washing. This case study is not out yet because we are still waiting to launch, but Albany Unified will be launching this fall with this type of system, which I think is a really cool and interesting way to approach it. And lastly, there's the third-party wash system where offsite third-party folks will pick up the dishes, the dirty dishes every day, and drop off the cleans, and they'll wash up in the interim. This is the easiest kind of model. It is a plug-and-play model, but it does cost. It does cost to pay a third party to wash. So whichever one works best for your school and your district, we want you encouraged to think about. But we have had all 3 of these types of case studies work, and we will be sharing them out in the Ditching Disposable Toolkit. Next slide, please. So there are some hints of how to work with the nutrition staff. Now, the nutrition directors are usually talking about thousands of meals served every single day. Their kind of mission is to serve all those meals and make sure they're healthy and keep under budget. And so they have a lot going on. I've talked to some who get 500 to 1,000 emails a day. And they also are constantly putting out fires, and they have high employee turnover. So be gentle with these folks. They want to do the right thing, but sometimes they have a lot going on. And so show them support. I tend to be a little bit more hands-off and kind of let folks in the school community do the nudging. But you know, meet them, talk with them, see what their issues are. Also know that sometimes progress is going to look slower than the urgency warrants. For me, that's okay. We're moving all in the right direction. And again, I'm trying to keep this as most sustainable. So it will last without me. It will last once the nutrition director retires. It will last because the school community wants to keep it going, and it is robust. So on the ground staff, again, please don't call them lunch ladies. They're staff. They're doing really important work. They're feeding children daily. They serve hundreds of kids in a very tight window. It's about a 2-hour window that they have to heat the food, get the food to the students, and also record the students taking the lunch. It's a quick turnaround. They often have multiple jobs because it is a part-time gig from about 10:30 to about 1:30 or 2. And know that if you get into school nutrition, you have some care about kids ultimately. But note that many of them have been doing this for 20 years. They're burnt out. They are going to be sometimes resistant to change. How do you overcome that barrier? You got to listen to them. You got to ask for their input. They usually have brilliant ideas. If they bring up a problem or concern, say you will address it and then address it. Like if they don't want a milk dispenser because they're too worried to spills, you can show them milk dispensers working, or you can also be like, I'm not going to be pushing for milk dispenser right now because this person is concerned about it. And also let them know that these toxic chemicals that affect the food are also affecting them. PFAS have been shown to be absorbing through the skin more than we originally think, and they're handling perhaps hundreds of these trays daily. So they're getting exposure over time. And we are wanting to protect them and as well as the children when we're kind of moving to a non-toxic reuse system. Next slide. Cool. How to be the squeakier wheel? I tend to be more flexible than annoying. So like condiment dispensers, milk dispensers are all ways to kind of shift and get a plastic reduction kind of approach to it. If your school is resistant, get another school nearby that's not resistant. If you are a mom who has a 7th grader who saw the plastic straw in the turtle video and the student wants to do something, great. Activate that student, but know that you might be having to go to the K-5 school that is feeding into the middle school because it'll be easier to transition that school rather than a larger middle school. So again, be flexible and think about this is a marathon and not a sprint. What will make it the easiest to kind of make that switch become more of a reality. And again, activate the students can be very impactful. Make sure the students are being respectful because everyone has, a certain job to do, but let them, let the students kind of be the messenger. Next slide. So the timeline, I would say plan for about a year. And I say usually June and July is a good time to start talking with the nutrition director. You can technically flip a school in a couple months if all the stars align, but I haven't seen that happen. And so just be aware that it will take time and that takes patience. We have a national foodware call where we get folks who are trying to do these transitions together to talk it through. This is a good place to share and also receive advice and also kind of be in that space of waiting where you're nudging, but it takes time and things to move along. Also, assemblies and messaging are super important. If you can get an assembly schedule, that means the transition is going to happen. Next slide. Cool. And so we want the Ditching Disposable Toolkit to be a repository for new information. John Oliver just dropped September 8th, a whole deep dive into school lunches. He's really unpacking universal meals, which is great, but we would want to include this into the Ditching Disposables Toolkit. So we're going to be updating it hopefully quarterly to kind of get some of these new items in there. If you haven't watched it, there's the YouTube link. It's definitely important to hear because they talk about why sustainability issues are hard to implement at the school lunch meal, which is important for you to keep your eyes on. Next slide. Can't not say something about universal free meals. If you can't get reusables, this is a nice pivot. Try to advocate for your state to move to universal free meals at the state level. Why is that important? Because it puts more funding into the system. Students are less stigmatized to take the lunch, so some more students will then take the lunch, and that puts more funding into the nutrition programs, which then can start moving towards reuse. This is a brilliant picture of Tim Walls, who got universal free meals for Minnesota's over the finish line, and all the kids are super stoked about it. And again, it is a game changer, and that's a good reminder to just let you all know you should vote in the next couple months. Next slide. The thing that we want to include in the next edition of the Ditching Disposable is kind of a student-facing landing page for it. That way we have all these fun student resources that the students create for other students to help stuff get over the finish line. Tarun's going to be talking a little bit about how he did, and we're capturing some of his best practices and then putting it into the Ditching Disposable Toolkit. I always want to remind adults that this is our problem to fix, so we can't necessarily put it on the students, but they can be the great allies because they're at the school community and they're helping the transition. And again, they have the urgency and they're very hard to argue with. But these are going to be some best practices that we're going to hopefully gear towards high schoolers, but other students to kind of get this over the finish line. And with that being said, next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. That was an amazing presentation. And with that, we'll pass to Stephanie Willits.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm Stephanie Willits. I'm the Fremont Unified School District Recycling Coordinator. It's a bit of a unique position. Most school districts don't have this, but the city of Fremont actually helps fund my position. So there's a strong partnership there already of their success is our success kind of thing. Next slide. So Fremont Unified is based in the Bay Area in California. We're the second largest in our county in Alameda and the 23rd largest in California. We have just about 33,000 students. 29 of them are elementary schools, feeding into 5 of the middle schools and high schools. It covers a large geographical area. So our food is prepared at each high school and delivered out to all of the elementary schools on a daily basis. And all of our campuses subscribe to compost and recycling service since about 2018. We have a large Asian and Indian community, just to let you know, because that really affects our food. Thank you. Next slide. This all started with our Thornton Junior High Energy and Sustainability Club, moderated by Miss Lisa Oliver. They were doing a great job of sorting and separating, but they realized there's a next level to it. And they also recognized that a lot of the plastic waste was being provided by the school district. So they got together and they drafted a resolution, they brought it to the board, and of course, it was approved with flying colors because our board members like to listen to our students and they take them very seriously. So the fact that they got to be involved in that process was very empowering to them. And next slide, it led to our resolution that we worked on. Next slide. Oh, yes. And this was the transition to zero waste. It has language in there like discontinuing distribution of plastic and the installation of water refill stations. And those are all things that we were easily able to have as ammo and say to the district, see, this is what the kids are asking for. So this is one of the ideas that we can do to make that change. I am very excited about it because I wanted to start doing it back when I started in 2017. And I got a lot of pushback from a lot of the departments. They weren't really interested. So when this passed, this was my opportunity to finally have the ammo that I needed to make those changes. Next slide. A lot of things started falling into place. We got a new child nutrition services director, Johannes Vanderpool. He was having a lot of problems, as most of you were after COVID, with the supply chain. We have the compostable trays that we give to our students, but it started to become such an issue that we would probably have to go back to styrofoam, which we did away with back in 2010. And it felt like, oh, we don't want to go backwards. Um, we want to go forward. So another thing that happened, Ben told me that CEH was doing free testing on the foodware that we served our students for PFAS. So again, that's a great opportunity. Let's go ahead and do that. And what we found is one of um, our trays did test positive for it. So again, it was more ammo. Hey, we need to make sure that we're feeding our kids off of safe foodware. Let's maybe try to transition to reusables. This is a good argument for that. Next slide. So now that I had the CNS department all on board wanting to make this change, we started brainstorming, okay, how can we logistically make this big system change? The Center for Environmental Health worked with us and introduced us to all these different nonprofits, um, plastic-free restaurants. They provided half of the cost of buying the reusables, the trays and the utensils that we needed to make that change, because we would be replacing a lot of pieces of plastic. So we have the sport kits that's wrapped in plastic with a straw and a napkin. We would be replacing that and transitioning to napkin dispensers and condiment pumps. And in order to fund the other half of the materials, the city of Fremont, our strong partnership, they paid for the other half of that. So we generally had no upfront cost to purchasing any of our reusable items. Another big partnership we have is with DishJoy. They are our dishwashing vendor. We don't have the capability of having dishwashers in our kitchens. A lot of our schools are very old. They weren't designed to have dishwashers. Some of them did have it, but they were very old and need to be replaced. So it was just too much of a nightmare to have to fund that. So we decided to go with an outside vendor. Um, we like to call them our dish fairies because they come at nighttime and they take our dirties and leave our cleans every day. So that's a great source for us to move forward. Stop Waste is our Alameda County waste agency. We have a strong partnership with them with curriculum and action projects that they work on with our students. They were able to provide assemblies for us. So we've got them, they either hooked us up with Eco Hero assembly shows or their mascot, Mr. Wiggly Worm, to do our assemblies and our kickoff. Next slide, please. So now that we had kind of a plan and answers, we went for the district for our support. Working with Ops and Grounds, making sure our custodial staff, because they're union, we're not placing any extra workload on them, but because our students are already used to stacking the compost trays after the end of the waste station, it's just merely going to be switching out the table that they had stacked their trays to a gray crate that DishJoy would be collecting them, and the custodian pushes that material to a designated area where DishJoy will come and pick it up. So it wasn't really any added workload for them. We sought out the schools, the principals that were really supportive and excited to do this program. A lot of coordination with them. Same with the purchasing department, making sure that they are set, that DishJoy and Plastic Free Restaurants, the people that we get the reusable materials are are a vendor for us to use. And then with the warehouse, they have to store the reusables and wait until DishJoy comes and picks up the required amount for that school and get that cleaned and sent off to the school at that time of their kickoff. And then we started going to the PTA, the back to school night. We had a table and were educating the parents about this new reusables rollout program that we're rolling out. They were very excited that we were having this provided to our students. And then we also had to get board approval because we were going to be using DishJoy as a vendor. That's a cost that we need to get approval. All across the board, everyone seemed to be very supportive and thankful that we had a decent, solid plan and logistics and nonprofit organizations helping with the load. So we had our team now. Next slide. So then it became the big kickoff. Every school that we started was, it was a big deal to have a school-wide assembly. So that had to be coordinated with the principals and with Stop Waste to make sure that we had educated the entire school body on what to expect and why we're doing it, and making sure that they all started before lunchtime. That is our mascot right there. That's actually Ben as Wiggly Worm. It's a really fun time, and it's a good opportunity to just go over of what goes where and then the change that we're making and why. We have to set up the weigh station. It's a little bit different. The only difference is where the gray crates are, that's where this tray stacking was. So they have a place to stack their tray and then a place to put their utensils at the end. The dispenser station, it's going to be different at every school. It's whatever the kitchen staff really prefers it to look like, but they have a place where they pick up their utensil, pick up a napkin, and then a condiment dispenser, which is a big hit with the kids. They love that one. And then having someone be a lunch monitor. That was myself. I was there all week just to remind kids what goes where and just saying, hey, don't let those utensils fall into the container. It needs to go into that crate over there. A lot of times we have our custodians really active, but it could be the noon supervisors, or it could be the green team themselves. They like to help educate their peers. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of what we got so far. We're really excited about this because with all the little pieces that we're eliminating, the straw, the spork, the wrapper, the condiment packets, it does equal out to about 2.3 million items that are not going into the landfill anymore. Next slide. This is my mantra. This has been my mantra for the past 2 years. It helps that you have a team, so it's not as bad, but yeah, that's definitely have to pivot in a lot of areas. Next slide. So the things that we've learned. The most surprising thing to me was the straws. The fact that we didn't provide straws to the kids anymore, they kind of freaked out that they couldn't drink their milk, even though they're the regular cartons where you have to open it up. It's like a spigot and you drink it from there. They were starting to use the straws from their juice boxes for the milk cartons. And they were also starting to steal the straws from juice boxes that were on the food share table to use for the milk. So I actually had to incorporate it into our assemblies to talk about the fact that we want to reduce the amount of straws because it's a plastic that we don't want in our lives, and that the cartons are designed to be used to drink straight out of that carton. So it was kind of a learning curve that we didn't expect to have, but that's just something to be aware of. It's also super important to have a point person for all of the coordination that needs to be done. In our case, it was me, but just making sure that everyone, that you have someone to contact with all of your team and your stakeholders, because for a kickoff, you have to make sure that it's okay with the principal, that date works. It's okay with Stop Waste, that they can provide the mascot. We need to make sure that Destroy goes to the warehouse to get the amount of materials needed for that school, have it be washed and dropped off the night before the assembly. So there's a lot of moving parts, and that's why I had to pivot a lot. But just knowing that if something falls, what to do, who to contact, and that it's not the end of the world. I did at one point have to do an assembly and say, starting tomorrow, this is the change instead of today, because the materials weren't there. So it's not the end of the world. It's okay. We move forward. Also scheduling waste audits. So we like the idea of having the fourth graders have a curriculum and actually be involved in the waste audit to see how well they did after changing to reusables. That was a bit of a challenge because the teachers have so much going on. There's always testing. It was a little bit difficult to coordinate, so we only got to 2 out of the 10 schools, but that's okay. We're still going to start doing that in the fall. Um, Making sure that if you're using an outside vendor for dishwashing, to have access for dish joy. So that was a whole nother piece of the puzzle. I worked with our ops and grounds supervisor. We did site visits to kind of determine where the dish joy material will be placed and having access to which door, making sure dish joy drivers had the key to that door, and making sure the night custodians were aware that this is a vendor that you will see every night. And then also a big hiccup that we have right now is the state health department. So we had approval from the county health department in San Francisco because that's where Dish Joy is based out of. We sent the approval um, even before we started the reusables program. Didn't hear anything. They said in December that there was concern about the process of the dishwashing and serving to kids. Again, we sent them what we have. This is the approval we have. Didn't hear anything. And then 2 weeks ago, our health inspector finally said, you need to pause this program because you do not have state approval for as this vendor. It was very disheartening because now we had to step back and we have to serve our kids on disposables again. Um, and we also have all of our partners kind of helping us out, trying to get this worked out as quickly as possible. The nice thing is, though, that our county health department person is very supportive and is helping to expedite it as quickly as possible because they know we're doing this for the right reasons. But the technicality is that the county doesn't have approval, it has to be statewide. So it's only been 2 weeks and maybe another week until we can go back to it. It's just a hiccup. We keep telling everyone, the kids and the kitchen staff, it's just a hiccup, it's just a roadblock. We're still moving forward. This isn't going to stop us. But for those of you that are in California, this probably won't be a problem for you because by that time they'll have state approval. And if you use Dish Joy, it's not going to be a problem. We're your guinea pig. We got it handled for you. Next slide. So we know that this is not a sustainable program for us to roll out to everyone right now, just because of the high cost of having an outside vendor for dishwashing. So our long-term goal is to have a centralized dishwashing station that we do in-house, and we can likely get that done because, again, our trucks are en route every day to deliver food, so we can figure out the logistics of picking up and dropping off dishes and getting it washed on site. Then that way we can roll out all of the 29 elementary schools. And hopefully by that time, they will grow up and get into the secondary, the middle school, and the high schools, and it'll be second nature and they will expect to have reusables at those locations. And then hopefully we will be able to brainstorm with them and try to figure out the logistics of having to do reusables at a school campus that where they could eat wherever they want. That's one of the main reasons why we started with elementary, because it's more controlled. They have a waste station that everyone has to go to. They all eat in this location. Whereas high schools, they could even leave campus and eat and come back. So having the students be partners with this to try to figure out how to do this program is going to be the most successful. We also want to try to roll out milk dispensers. We started piloting it at one of the elementary schools before we had to shut down, and it was going really well. And we really hope that it extends to the juice, because it's the juice that is trash. The compost, the milk cartons are considered compost in our district, but it's the juice boxes that are all trash, and that will eliminate the need for even having a straw. So that's one of our big goals too. Another one is just reducing plastic in general. with our food. So a lot of our like grilled cheese sandwiches and burritos, and like you see in here, the chips bag is wrapped in plastic. We're trying to reduce that as much as possible. But again, it could be for convenience, for less workload on our kitchen staff, for cost effectiveness. But we've already started doing a lot of more scratch cooking, which has reduced a lot of that plastic waste. Next slide. And with that, I want to thank you again for listening and attending. I really hope that this kind of inspires at least one little step into the reusables. Um, and that's one of the things I love about our industry is that we want each other to be successful. So we're always sharing best practices and resources with each other. So please let us know. We're here to answer questions and provide guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And with that, we'll pass it to Tarun.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think Stephanie and Ben were able to give somewhat of an introduction to me, but I'll still go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Tarun. I'm the CH Procurement team's intern for this summer. Next slide. So I'm currently a junior at Dublin High School. I've been deeply involved in environmental advocacy, focusing mostly on zero waste initiatives. I authored and advocated for the zero waste resolution that was being talked about by Stephanie and Ben, the Roosevelt resolution. The Roosevelt resolution is named after President Theodore Roosevelt for his conservation efforts. And yeah, so some of the pilot programs that Stephanie was talking about, those are elementary schools I went to. I went to Forest Park, which is one of the first elementary schools to roll out this program. So I'm very proud as the author of this resolution to see this kind of progress being made in schools that I attended. So far, the resolution has passed in 2 districts, Fremont Unified and Dublin Unified. It's helped transition, hopefully transition in the future, 42 schools and more than 45,000 students that will be going through these various schools. Next slide. Okay, so with regards to zero waste policy, I see advocacy in 3 main steps. So the first step, next slide. Okay, so the first step is what people think is the easiest, which is recognizing the problem. But in my opinion, it is the hardest because it's not just about you recognizing the problem, it's also about district administrators and the district leadership understanding that there's a problem in there's a real problem that needs to be addressed by the district immediately. We started with waste audits at our school to measure how much waste was being produced and to identify where improvements could be made. And that involved us to actually get deep into trash. And so you can see a lot of the images. It was very smelly. It was a lot of work. But what it told the district is that, oh, there's definitely a problem. And we as students have gone in and highlighted that. So, you know, there's definitely something you need to do about that. So I think conducting a waste audit is one of the very easy ways for your district to realize that there is a problem and for you to present quantitative data that they can't simply reject. So that was kind of that's kind of what I would say is the first step, is to recognize the problem and ensure that the district understands that there is a problem. So next slide. Okay. Once the problem is clearly identified, the next crucial step is building consensus among all the stakeholders. That includes students, staff, administrators, and even the community. We frame the resolution as a win-win. For school administrators, we show that switching to reusable items would eventually save money on the long run by switching to reusables and reusable trays and utensils, that there wasn't a need to constantly buy single-use plastics. For students, it became an educational opportunity to learn about sustainability firsthand, which was one of the more important concepts that we were discussing, right? In schools and classrooms, students know that using plastics are bad. They have that understanding in mind, but when they get served lunches in schools, they just come in that same single-use plastic, and these students really don't come out learning anything. So we see zero waste education. The first step in zero waste education is, ensuring that schools themselves are not engaging in significant plastic usage or food waste and things like that. So that was the main point for us, and that was kind of what was leading the discussion in a lot of these meetings with the district and other stakeholders. And yeah, so ultimately building consensus is also one of the big steps because you need to take a number of perspectives. You need to get the district administrators, you need to get custodians, you need to get all of them, and then understand where everyone stands on certain issues. There will be some people that will be very picky. For example, in Fremont, we had a trustee ask about how switching to reusables may impact, instances of violence. For example, steel forks and maybe like steel knives, right? Maybe would like increase, would increase the chance of violence between students. But I know like we addressed that saying, schools, students have been using reusables for a long time. People who got lunch from schools have been using steel forks and it hasn't been a problem before. There's always going to be little niche questions and niche concerns that people are going to come up, and ultimately take effort to build compromise, to build consensus, and to engage in discussion. The next slide. Okay, accountability. This, I think, is also a very important step because it's not enough to just, say, okay, we passed the resolution, great. We also need to have the mechanisms in place to track the success. So what we did in the Fremont Unified School District is that we included a cause for the district to come up with an implementation plan 6 months after the passage of the resolution. 6 months after, I believe so that the district came up with somewhat of a plan to address this, and that eventually led for the implementation of the 10 pilot programs that Stephanie was talking about. In the Dublin Unified School District, we asked the district to form a separate committee composed of students, parents, teachers, like support staff, custodians, all of them to get on board and discuss possible solutions that can be taken to, to carry out the clauses on the resolution. So far, we haven't been able to assemble a committee, but we did have somewhat of a preliminary meeting with Ben and other stakeholders, including the maintenance and operations director and the CNS director. We are hoping to kickstart that again in fall, so in this semester. And so that's kind of where we stand. We also want to set measurable goals, such as, we're going to say, okay, we're going to cut food waste by this much % by this year. And those are the kind of things that we as students can say, okay, the district needs to do this by this. And we need to and there's also a lot of goals set by SB 1383, State Bill 1383, which basically mandates that I believe schools have to cut down their food waste by 50% by 2025. I might be wrong on the year, but that's kind of the measure that gives. So there's a lot of numbers that we can use in our advantage to basically say, okay, the district needs to do this by this time. There needs to be an implementation plan. There needs to be a committee to be carrying out this thing, all that kind of stuff. Next slide. Okay. As an intern with CH's procurement team, I'm using my experiences to help develop a comprehensive zero waste policy guide for high school students. This guide will provide students with the tools they need to conduct waste audits, initiate pilot programs, and engage their own schools in adopting such policies. And so my goal is just to empower other students across the state and even maybe the nation to implement policies like the reusable resolution in their own districts and kind of understand that it's completely possible for us to transition our schools and our districts to zero waste to landfill entities. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And then with that, we can now move on to the Q&A session. So I'm going to stop sharing now and bring up all of our speakers, and I'll pop into the Q&A session and we can start answering some of these questions. So the first question up we have is, what aspect of this project has been the most rewarding?
It's with the reusables, and also they're cheering when I do these assemblies at schools and they're like, stainless steel, no more plastic. Yeah. So that makes me feel really good. Stephanie?
For me, it's just the messaging of using something for 20 minutes and throwing away every day is now eliminated. We are not teaching them that that's a good habit to have anymore.
Yeah, honestly, it's what the students take out of this, right? The students understand that, okay, maybe single-use plastics aren't so great anymore. Before, they didn't really understand that because there was a conflict in what the school was saying and what the school was doing. So now there's no discrepancy, and students can finally understand that, okay, plastics aren't that great, and maybe I need to carry these practices to outside the school, and maybe these students will have this kind of understanding for the rest of their lives.
All right, thank you so much. And then the next question we have is, I'm having issues getting my school administrators to understand the urgency of this project. It is something they're interested in, but is never a project that's taken up. How can I better communicate the importance of reusables?
I'll start with that one. I think the biggest ammo that I had was having the kids create a resolution and having that passed. Um, Now it's not just me trying to get something adults to change, it's kids asking for this systematic change. And how can um, our departments work together to make this happen? And it really creates a district green team type of um, culture.
Again, for me, it's again the understanding that the students get out of this. That's what's important to me. There are health benefits. There are actually very important health benefits, not benefits, health detriments that we're avoiding. Actually, there's a lot of environmental and short-term environmental benefits. But ultimately, the students understanding that we have to adopt these sustainable practices for to prevent some kind of catastrophic event in the future.
Mhm. Also, like, weight is oftentimes a school's method of not dealing with a problem because they often know that you are going to move with your student out of the district eventually. So, yeah, that environmental health piece is not something that they've heard often. And when you say, I am worried about the fertility of my young person in my life, they listen in a different way. And it's really, really hard to say, oh, it's too hard to take care of the health of a young person. So yeah, I want to encourage the struggle's real, and also pivoting to a nearby school, showing them that you will put your efforts to whoever will listen is a move, but try to uplift that environmental health aspect.
Same with wellness. So we have a lot of wellness committee policies and a lot of wellness centers that are being created at our schools, and that really ties in.
Thank you. And then we have another question. What is being done to help reduce trays and utensils going into the garbage?
Trays aren't really a problem. These things are big, they're shiny. It's not necessarily something that students are going to think is okay to throw away. And you can see it if it does go in there for a quick grab. Utensils are a little more tricky.
Mhm.
Again, we've been training students and also adults to throw away utensils after meals for decades. And so it takes a moment to hit that reset button. There have been schools that incentivize, like, hey, return these. If you find them, you can get a reward as a student. Green team members who are monitoring the waste is what we do with three-stream sorting anyways. And so having them kind of enlisted in that, and also making sure that wherever they are using the forks, maybe drop it off at the beginning of the waste station rather than at the end. A lot of students like to scrape with their forks into the compost. Lovely. But sometimes it's just as easy as turning the tray over and dumping it that way. But yeah, utensils are a struggle. Plastic-free restaurants will re-up their initial purchase of utensils after a year of implementation because they know that loss rates is a real thing.
Thank you. And then our last question is from the chat. How do you deal with the waiting time? Do kids need to wait for longer to get their food, and do you need extra staff to serve the food?
Tarun, do you want to talk Forest Park really quick? How long was the wait? Did you remember how long the waiting time for Forest Park was?
Oh, the waiting time, regardless if there's single use or trays, is going to take a long time. In Thornton, I think the line used to basically stretch the front of the school. So we would wait for, I think, 12 or 13 minutes on average to get lunch if you were in the end of the line. So that's kind of what we're seeing. Um, yeah, so a lot of the times a lot of how Fremont schools I've seen operate is that you grab the tray and then you get your food. I know a lot of districts do it differently where they have the trays and all the food pre-assembled on them and they expect you to take it with them. Maybe that would be faster, but in Fremont, how I've seen it work is that you grab the tray and then you grab everything else you need. And that's kind of why it takes some time because all those students need to do that. Yeah, so that's kind of how I see it. I'm not sure if there's quite a bit of difference because it's going to take the same amount of time. but I think Stephanie would be able to answer that better.
Yes, I was gonna say, good news, we don't do it like that anymore. So it's a little bit shorter time, but it's not much of a difference at all. So instead of the kids grabbing a compostable tray that has the entree already on there, it's just on stainless steel. So there's no difference for the kitchen staff. There's no difference for the students. They just grab the entree if they want the vegetarian or the meat option, and then they go to the salad bar.
And really quick, it takes a learning curve. The students are super quick to pick up how to get the food in a different way. It takes them about 2 or 3 days. The adults take a little bit longer. If you launch with an assembly, behooves you to monitor for at least a week. I often recommend 2 to make sure that the system is going as quickly as possible. The first couple days will take a little bit longer, but I assure you, once they get into the swing of things, it goes just as smoothly as before.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our speakers. We are at time now, but I just wanted to say quickly, this webinar has been recorded. Anyone who has registered for this webinar will be sent a link to the recorded webinar. It's also available on the CEH's website, and we will also be including slides. I'll also include some contact information in our follow-up email, so if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Yep. The questions in the Q&A, we can answer those and send them your all's way too, so feel free to put some more in there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.